Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's meetup. On today's agenda, Lindsay and Walt will be providing an overview of the public crime maps and apps. As a reminder, we'll be recording this meetup and posting it on meetups.com. If you would like to make comments or chat with other participants during the meetup, feel free to use the chat panel. However, if you'd like to submit a question for the team to answer, then please submit it through the Q&A panel. With that said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Walt.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Heather. I appreciate that. And good morning, I guess, to those of you that are on the West Coast. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Walter Potts, and I am joined today with Lindsay Thomas. And we're going to be focusing this meetup on some of the law enforcement applications, including the public crime maps. So let's jump into it. First thing I wanted to tell you a little bit about is the public crime maps are part of the set of law enforcement solutions that we have available to you that you can use. A little brief about these solutions. They are collections of useful maps and apps. If you're not familiar with them, these, as you see on the screen here, are focused for law enforcement agencies. They're all configurable and they are extendable, so you can make them use with your data. They're freely available. You can download them, deploy them, and they are fully supported. The intention of these solutions is to be able to allow you guys to deliver maps and applications quickly through your organization and provide sort of a roadmap for standard capabilities that typical law enforcement agencies need to leverage. We hope that we can help you stay current then with future releases and avoid legacy technology by keeping these solutions up to date for you. In fact, some of these were just updated with the release that went out today, so you'll see those solutions get updated periodically. So that's a little bit about some of the law enforcement solutions that are part of the local government solutions. In the law enforcement solutions, you'll see there's a number of them that are available. If you haven't been there, I recommend that you go there, and we'll give you a link a little bit later on so you can see where you can go to look them up. I want to just kind of go over some of them that are available to you now, kind of give you an overview of the wide variety of solutions that are available for law enforcement. The first one on the list here is the incident mapping, and it allows you to automate the process for importing and publishing your incident data to feature service. It reads data that's coming out of a computer-aided dispatch or records management system and brings it into a standardized schema and then publishes it so that it can be consumed in other subsequent applications like a dashboard, for example. Incidents could be anything from calls for service, crimes, fires, accidents, etc. Anything that has basically a point feature that has an incident occurrence. We have another one in there we call repeat and near repeat. It allows crime analysts to do some predictive analysis so they can look at historical crimes and see where repeat patterns exist and then create a series of prediction zones based on those patterns. We have another set of applications, a collection of applications for tactical operation planning, which is a completely different audience, more for operational staff to be able to plan out tactical operations such as a drug takedown or something like that. You can plan that out ahead of time, put it on a map, get imagery and all the information that's necessary, and then communicate during the operation with the field personnel that are out doing surveillance work and so on, and report it back to command field operation staff using a dashboard. We have another one in there for cell phone analysis, which allows investigators to be able to map out call data records for investigative purposes and map those to how many calls have been taken by a particular caller to a cell tower. We have a series of applications that help you tackle the opioid epidemic, and there are a wide variety. I think there are 15 or 16 of those applications in there. The purpose of these applications is to allow agencies to be able to communicate with the public, for example, like provide locations where drug treatment facilities are, where they can drop off drugs that are not unused prescription drugs. They also include some internal applications that can be used by first responders to be able to track overdoses or where naloxone has been deployed, so you can see patterns in your community. So there's a wide variety of them that are available to you in there. But the ones we're going to be focusing on today, as we mentioned, are the public crime mapping applications. So the first question I think it's important to address is why public crime mapping, and the big question here is, why would a law enforcement agency want to put out all their crimes for the world to see on the internet on a map? And there basically are two main reasons for this. One, it allows those law enforcement agencies to be able to communicate and demonstrate transparency by putting that information out for people to be able to see what's going on in their area. So it helps demonstrate that transparency. And then the second reason is to be able to engage the citizens with up-to-date crime information or historical information for community meetings so they can prepare for those meetings. It's focused then on two main audiences. The first audience is just the average citizen that just wants to see a quick map of recent crimes at a specific location. I want to see what's going on around me, for example. The second audience is a little bit more for advanced search and filtering. It allows community leaders or members of the media to be able to report on historical crimes in a neighborhood or some other reporting district. So you can then use that information for subsequent meetings. And then it provides a set of pre-configured solutions which then can be easily deployed into your organization, and we'll show you a couple examples of that a little bit later on. All right, so the first one on the list then is the public crime maps. This one, as I mentioned, is very simple and easy to use, and it can be used just to view recent crime activity in your use. So you can search by an address, you can make a point on a map, zoom in, shows all the crimes, and they're organized by category, as you see in the little screenshot there. You can also then further filter those crimes by the type of crime, the date of the crime, or the time of day when the crime occurred. And then you can select out the concerns that you have in your area. It includes a set of updated crime symbology that you'll see as we get into the demonstration here in a few minutes. All the crimes by type, and it's displayed on top of the new vector-based map, so it makes it really easy for the public to be able to see where a particular type of crime has occurred by the symbology in a given location near them with the background information. So it's very easy to be able to see. One thing I should mention on that is it makes it easier for you also, that is the people that are deploying these applications for law enforcement agencies and that they can share with the public, because you don't have to make the decisions about, well, how do I symbolize it and so on. There's just a set of symbology that you can use. All right, the second one then is what we call the neighborhood crime reports. And as I mentioned, this one provides some more advanced search methods. So I can select out a neighborhood that I'm interested in. If I'm a community leader in my neighborhood and I want to communicate to that. Perhaps a district or a ward. If I'm a ward council member or somebody like that, I want to see how crimes have changed over time. How our mitigation efforts are improving or not in our ward or our area. You can also define a user-defined area, so I can search by a buffer on a street or around a park or something like that and see how crimes are occurring there. I can then further select out the types of crimes that I'm interested in, same way as before with the type of crime, the date, and the time of day for the crime. And as you do that, you'll see the map update, and you'll be able to view those crimes over a period of 7 days of the day of the week, so you can see if there are patterns in your neighborhood, and the time of the day during the day when those crimes occur. And it also allows you to then generate a crime report, hard copy report that you can take with you for your meetings, or download the selected crime data. And then I said the point for this particular application is to provide a self-service for FOIA or Freedom of Information Act requests. And that helps lessen the burden on administrative staff so they don't have to spend so much time generating those reports for the members of the media or the community that want them. So with that, let's just pop in and take a look at and see what these applications look like. And I'm going to start off with the public crime map. That's the first one on the list here. And as you can see, there it has the information presented to us. When you pop it, I should mention these applications that you can view online are using fictitious data that I made up, just sample data. I've placed the dots on the map around there just to give you a good example of what it could be. And then you can replace it with your own crime data. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to just type in an address and search for that particular address and show what crimes have occurred in an area near me. And this is the address where I'm searching on here. And then you can see over on the right side, the list of crimes have been updated, and they are categorized by the type of crime. And the first one we have in this category is property crime. So I can see things like arson, burglary perhaps, where larceny has occurred, and so on. And so that's a typical what's called property crimes. That as you zoom out, you'll see more of them in there. And then quality of life crimes include things like disorderly conduct, vandalism, fraud, and so on. And then, of course, we have violent crimes, which include aggravated assault, robbery, and homicide, and so on. So you can see then a list of crimes that have occurred in this particular area where I'm searching. And I can further refine this list if I want to. I can simply just click on this filter widget and then reduce it down here, and I've got aggravated assaults listed. I can pick off the list which ones I might be, and I happen to have some here in the map, so I'll just turn on that filter, and you can see it's reduced it down so I can just see the aggravated assaults in the specific area here. I could further refine it down a little bit if I want to, using the date of the crime. So if I just select the date, I'll click June 1st to the end of the year, last year, and you can see it's reduced it down to just that one crime that happened in that time period. And again, this is just using sample data. In this case, this sample data happens to be using hour of day, which is using a 24-hour clock. So, 0600 to 1800. You may have data that's reported differently, but you can also reduce it down further that way if you choose to. And then I can just turn these independently off so I can see what crimes have happened in an area and search for them that way. I should mention a couple other things you can do here. You can also, if you're interested and you're in an area, you can turn on the base map imagery. Again, this is for the public to be able to see where exactly this is happening in my neighborhood, if they want to. And then finally, I can generate a print of that particular area if I want to, and I've already got one printed here, so I just take a look at it. So this gives me a quick way to be able to print out, again, what's crimes that are happening near me over the last 6 months or something like that. So again, it's just a quick, simple way to be able to get information about crimes that are happening near you. And so that's the first one. The second one, the neighborhood crime apps, as I mentioned, is intended for community leaders and so on, or members of the media that are interested in finding out crimes in a specific area over a period of time and comparing those crimes. So one way we might do that is, first of all, we can look at the About widget. It's telling us a little bit about how we can use this application. It gives us some instructions about it. And over here on the crime reports on the right side here, I can see that it gives me a few things that I can do and the ways that I can define an area of interest. And the first one is just using place name. So what I can come in here is I can just type in a letter. Like I'll just type in H, and it'll give me a list then of all the neighborhoods that have that in it, and I've just searched for hunting for Hunter's Woods, so I selected that one out, and then if I want to, I can just select report for it, and it gives me then a list of crimes that have occurred in Hunter's Woods, which is not my neighborhood that I selected there. A couple other things, you can also download a report if you want to, and to a CSV file, and I have one that we've already done, and so you can see what it looked like. So if you want to take this with you and then do some further analysis on that, you could. And of course, then you can also generate a report. So I have a number of different reporting formats that I can print it out to here. So I'm just going to select the portrait format, and it generates a crime report, tells me my area of interest and some information about it. It gives me a summary of the type of crimes, how many occurred in that area, and it gives me the individual list of crimes. In this case, I have it configured so that it's using these three attributes: the type of crime, the address, and the date for it, and it tells me how many have occurred on that date in that particular address. And then it just gives me a little map of it. If I was to wait, it would show me a map of that, like I showed you earlier. Okay, so that's a little bit about how you can generate a report. I'm going to go back here and show you there's another way that you can do that as well, though. So I'm just going to hit the Start Over button and zoom back out a little bit. And I might want to define it in a user-defined area. So perhaps I'm interested in looking at, I'm just going to zoom in here to the downtown area. And again, this is all fictitious data. So those of you that might be from Naperville, don't worry about it. This is not real. So I'm going to click on the Draw button over here. And you can see that there's a number of ways that I can select out my user-defined area. So I can select out a point, specify a buffer distance down here, or in this case here, I might select out a road that I'm interested in and just draw it across here and say, yes, I'm interested in this area. And then I'm going to buffer this, I think, about 500 feet and see what kind of a report that I can generate from that. And it does the same thing, only it's selecting out those crimes that are in that particular area. So there's a number of ways you can do that. I'm going to hit the Start Over again and see some other ways that you can do it. You can also specify just in general area, like I'm just kind of generically wanting to know what's going on in this area, nothing in particular. Or if I wanted to, I could also just select one of these neighborhoods instead of specifying the name and get information on that as well. So again, there's a number of ways that you can select out your area of interest through a neighborhood. It could be that you're not using a neighborhood. It might be that you're using a precinct if it's for internal use or something else. So that's a couple ways you can use that to select out crimes that are happening in an area. What I'm going to do here real quick is I'm just going to select out this neighborhood here, and then we're going to filter it down. So I click over here to the crime filter, and then I can select out again the type of crimes that are occurring in here. Let's see how many aggravated assaults I have in this area, and then I can select out the time, the date, and as I do that, I'm going to get rid of this just so you can see this a little bit better. As I do this, you can see then here are all the aggravated assaults, and then I can select out the time and the hour of day and so on. As I select out the hour of day, you'll see the update down here on the map. A couple things regarding this that you can do with it. It helps to be able to select out your area of interest first, and then filter it and then be able to see when those particular crimes are occurring. I can also click on the hour of day if I'm interested in seeing exactly when those particular crimes occurred, and it just makes it a little bit simpler for me to be able to see if there is a pattern overnight or something else. So if I turn that off, then I get a little slider down here so that I can reduce it down a little bit to some hours that I'm particularly interested in. So that gives you kind of a high-level overview of the two applications that we have available, the public crime map and the neighborhood crime reports, and some things that you can do with that to generate information about those applications. So I'm just going to pop back here and
Hey, Walt, we have a few questions regarding the two apps that you just
sure. Why don't we
demonstrated.
take those now, and we can then go on to Lindsay in a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Robert had a question. Well, it was more of a concern of how making this stuff available to the public, it will make criminals harder to catch, and also about protecting victims' identities as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a common question, actually. The both of those actually are common questions, and the answer to them basically is with the local law enforcement agencies. They are the ones that have to make those decisions on what information they do want to put out. Because, like you said, if it's in this case here, I'm looking at data that's like 6 months old or so, so it's past information. But regarding what information you might include in there, typically. We find that most law enforcement agencies will redact the information that they provide out there. They might just provide the type of crime it was and maybe a general location, and sometimes they will provide just the block that it happened on, or they maybe won't provide that information at all, just a dot on the map. In other cases, if some law enforcement agencies don't want to show anything, what they may do is just show a number of crimes that occurred with a number in each one of these areas. So that would be something you need to talk to your local law enforcement agencies about to see how comfortable they are or whether they want to share that information at all.
Okay, great. Nancy had a question. It was when you were demonstrating the public crime map. Her question was, which fields has these crime categories in them? And also, what is the database format for the field, the date field?
Good question. Yeah, the date, you can format the date. We're using a couple things here. These are using, both of these applications are using just standard web app builder. And so, you have all the capabilities, the standard capabilities you have with web app builder. And if we have time later on, maybe I'll show you how we can go into the crack it open and show you how the widgets were configured, but you're free to configure those however you want to. So in other words, it's using the data that you publish to ArcGIS Online inside the Web App Builder application and consuming those date fields in the widgets. In my case here, I have a couple of fields in here. I have typical data that comes out of a records management system, may have the date of the crime in one field and the time of day in another field, or reporting date and the actual date of crime occurred in two different fields. So it really depends on the data that's coming out of your records management system. There are also some tools that you can change the format of the date if necessary. And then you had a question about the category. That's right. So there's two fields that I'm using in this sample data. When you deploy it, as Lindsay's going to show you here in a little bit, you'll see how that you can deploy the application. And when you do, you'll get the standard schema that I'm using. And that schema that I happen to be using here for the sample data has a field for the type of crime, and we're using the UCR, or Uniform Crime Reporting field descriptions for symbolizing the data. You could also use NIBRs if those of you that are familiar with that format, that reporting method, if you use that one. And then I have a second field that I use called category. And what I've done in that is I've just used the, I believe I used the NIBRs format. It's the National Incident-Based Reporting System, I believe the FBI put out, to categorize each one of these crimes to provide the public with information about which ones are considered property violent crimes and so on, because that's quite common. People want to know that. You don't have to do it that way. Nancy, you could just have it display the type of crime instead of the category of crime, but I think it's really up to you. Sorry for the long answer.
That's okay. Also, kind of a follow-up. So is the date format required?
Yeah, you'll have some sort of a date. It's best to have some sort of a date when the crime occurred, or at least when it was reported. I wouldn't say you'd have to do that, but it's best so you can show it. In the standard configuration, where these apps are built out of the box, there is a date field required in there. But again, you can configure that to not use that date field if you don't want to.
Okay. David has a question. Are you able to add more widgets to this template via Web App Builder?
Yes, that's correct, David. And you'll see a couple of examples of that a little later on.
Nancy had another question when you were demonstrating the neighborhood crime reports. Can you do a time series to see the crimes displayed by month?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think there's probably a way that you configured it. I haven't done that. I'd have to think that through a little bit. For the public, you probably would want to have some kind of a by month selector that reads the date field, and have a pick list or something like that. I think is a good way to do that.
Okay. Bill had a question that we're going to touch upon in a couple of minutes of just, is this particular map, the neighborhood crime map, a web map, meaning that it's fully deployable in ArcGIS Online, or is it something that requires an install? And Lindsay will be demonstrating on how you can get that app in a minute.
That's correct. Yep.
Robert also said, well, I agree that it's important for others to know what's going on in their neighborhood, especially if they're about to move into an area from another city. Is this the kind of information the property values go down because it's perceived as a bad area?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's probably not a question I can answer, but it's something that your local community leaders would have to answer. And yeah, there's debate about that. I think that's a good point, is that some people don't want that information out. And of course, other people say, no, we have a right to it. So I think it's something you'd have to talk to your law enforcement agencies to see even if they want to do that.
Okay, I think that's all for now.
Okay,
great.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop sharing here and turn it over to Lindsay, and she's going to answer some of those questions about where you can get these solutions and how you can deploy them. So I will stop sharing here, Lindsay.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And so, thanks, Walt. It's a great demo. And so, how do we get these great applications, and how do we get started within our own local government? So, like many of our other apps, we come out to solutions.arcgis.com, and if you select local government, and then go into law enforcement, you'll see all the law enforcement. You'll see a great variety of law enforcement solutions that Walt kind of talked about a little bit earlier, that kind of help support protecting human life and property within your community. And so if you're interested in any of these, as you kind of scroll down, you can see the repeat and near repeat incident maps, public crime map, neighborhood crime reports, how you would tackle, how these apps could help you tackle the opioid epidemic or reduced homelessness. Just click on Learn More. And when you click on Learn More, it's going to take you out to a solution page dedicated to that solution and kind of getting that stood up within your organization. And so every time you go to those pages, we have the kind of the same pattern. So this is the public crime map. And this is the neighborhood crime reports. And you can see that we follow the same pattern with requirements, what you get, what's new, view application, and then instructions on how to get started. So the public crime map is taking advantage of Web App Builder for ArcGIS. And when we look at the requirements, there's two sets of requirements. So we have the automated deployment method, and we also have the manual deployment method. So the automated deployment method, you can install an add-in for ArcGIS Pro, and it'll help create all those items within your ArcGIS Online account or within your ArcGIS Enterprise account. Manual deployment is instructions that will take you through going through the help and creating those items individually, manually, as opposed to automated. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so what do you get? So when you deploy the public crime application, you're going to get the application. You're going to get the map that supports the application, and then you're going to get the feature layers and feature layer views that support those applications. And so these are the items that are going to get laid down within ArcGIS Online. And then finally, our What's New section is kind of like release notes or what's new. So if we have any enhancements, like maybe there's new symbology, we are taking advantage of a new widget or a new feature, we'll list it there. And then if there was a bug fix or anything related to it, we would list that there, just so if you wanted to update the application later, you could see what things are going to be included in that update. And so finally, to get started, you can go into click on Get Started, and we'll start taking you through kind of the deployment of this public crime map. And so you can install the add-in. Sorry, if you go into the automated section, the first thing we're going to ask you to do is to install the add-in for ArcGIS Pro. And so go ahead, download it, and then I'll talk you through the install in a second here. The next thing we do is deploy the solution, configure the solution, and load the data. I'm not going to read the help. I'm going to just show you. So I'm going to jump out to Pro and kind of go through that automation right now. So I've actually gone ahead and downloaded the add-in already. And so it's going to come in a folder that's zipped. I'm using ArcGIS Pro 2.1. If I come in, just double click on that add-in, hit install, and then that's going to install the add-in to Pro. And then when I open up Pro and I come in and I click the Share tab, you're going to see an ArcGIS Solutions deployment button right here. And if you click that, it's going to open the Tasks pane. And you'll see the ArcGIS Solutions deployment tool. And we have a series of tasks which are very similar to the help that I showed earlier that'll help walk you through that deployment. I'm just going to close this here. So the first thing you're going to want to do is sign into your ArcGIS Online account or your ArcGIS Enterprise account. So to do that, you'd come over here and you can sign in. I've already done that. And that's the account where you want all the content to be created. And it's important to remember that you should be a publisher or an administrator if you want to be able to write content into that organization. So the next step is actually to deploy the solution. And what's so great about this, and this is one of my favorite things, is we've got categories so you can explore what we have for local government or emergency management, but also it's got great searchability. So we're interested in law enforcement. And so if I search for that, we're going to see any sort of solution that's related to law enforcement within emergency management, local government, state government, and you can see that all here. But specifically, we're not just interested in law enforcement today, we're interested in crime and crime mapping. So when I type in crime, we're going to see we have two great solutions that we've talked about today that we can deploy within our organization. So we have neighborhood crime reports and public crime map. I'd like to deploy both of these into my organization, so I'll select both. I can create a new folder to put them in, or I can select the folder I'd like them to be deployed in. And if I just click deploy, it'll create those items within my ArcGIS Online content. And so to save some time, I'm just gonna jump out to content. And you can see within this group, I've created, all the items kind of related to the public crime map, neighborhood crime reports have been created here. And so if you remember, be pointing out what you get with public crime map, there's the application, there's the web map, and there's the crime feature layer and feature layer views. And the same thing goes for neighborhood crime reports, which also uses the crimes feature layers and public safety districts as well, and the neighborhood crime reports web map. And so we don't create the crimes layer twice. We actually create it once, so it's shared. So that way you're managing the data in one place for these two applications. And so these things are all empty. They're all connected. But if we jump out to crimes and we actually go in and look at the data, you're going to see it's completely empty. There's no data in there. And so to bring that application to life, what we're going to do is we're going to port some data in there from our from our record management system or your CAD system. So you get that data from that management system, and then you can pump that into the crimes layer, and then the apps kind of come alive. And so you keep on following the task within your pro session. And so maybe you have additional fields, or you have some things that you'd like to include in your public crime map that aren't included in the schema that we're providing. For the most part, the schema that we do provide is industry standard. We have offense IDs, we have caller IDs, we have incident reporting time, incident call time, all those kind of general things that we see in the majority, like 99% of the cases that are doing crime mapping, we have those attributes. But sometimes maybe you have a field that's important to your, law enforcement agency that we haven't included, or something that is unique. And so you can go ahead and add an additional field that has that information. So maybe that's beats. Maybe within your precincts you have many beats and you want to illustrate how many crimes are within a beat, or that type of thing, and add that attribute to it. So you can come in here, you can have a field name called beats. We'll call it beats for meetup, so it's nice and easy to read. And then we can click run. And when we do this, this is actually going to add a new field to the service that we created within our organization. So you can see here that we've successfully added the field. We get the green check mark, which makes us feel great. Makes me feel great when I get a green check mark. And then we get into, you can modify domains. So say of these beats, they have different names. So maybe it's beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, but maybe it's alpha, beta, Charlie, delta, depending on how your organization kind of talks about those things. So if you go into the crimes layer, we can select the field that we just created, and then we could go in and we could create domains kind of based around this for that attribute. So I'm just gonna skip that ahead here to save some time. And then finally, so we've done a little bit of configuration on the schema to make it work for our data. And then finally, we're gonna go ahead and add crime data to that empty schema. To save some time, there's over 1,000 records, and to make it look really good, I've preloaded a bunch of data, and I just have a smaller subset that I'm going to append to that data just as an example. So if you see the little black crosses, those are additional crimes that I'm going to add to that feature layer. So, sorry, the input crime, the crime subset. So these are the layers that we want to add. The target is going to be crimes, which we created. And then the field mapper is actually matching up those things. So the schema for the most part is very, very close. You can see the beats for meetup doesn't have any attributes there. But we can go ahead and do some field mapping. So offense ID is actually called ID offense for us. So we add that as selected and we're rectifying that. So that information will be easily kind of put into the feature layer. And then full address is actually called address. And add that as selected. And so if I go ahead and click run, this is going to append the data to the feature layer. And if you can use your imagination, imagine that's a thousand features kind of all populating at once. And so yeah, we got the green check mark again. It completed successfully. And if you see, I turn off the crime subset that I have here, you can see that it's been added to that layer. And so what does that mean now that we've added all that data? So if we open up the public crime map, the only change we did was kind of add data to it. We view the application and you can see the new data that we've added. And now you have your own crime map. But I don't think we're done yet because we probably don't want to create something called public crime map. We probably want to do a little more additional customization for where you're at. So if we go into attributes within Web App Builder, maybe we want to call this the City of Naperville Crime Viewer. Feel free to have a better name than that. And maybe you want to have some different subtitle. You could also customize the logo so it's the city police seal if you want, or something like that. And also I think Dave mentioned something about using additional widgets. So, you know, we have the about button, we have the print, we have a base map switcher, but maybe you feel like you don't need those things, or maybe you want to add some additional information. You could always come into the about section and have some additional kind of content about how to use the viewer, who to contact if there's any issues with this, or if you wanted to report an issue with the website. You can always make those additional personal organizational changes as well. And something a lot of people want to do is change the color. So if you want to use orange, or if you want to use any sort of different color theme, you can choose that and change the layout. So there's a variety of options on how you can kind of configure that application to look really good for your city. And so, hold on. And so also, so we updated the crime layer, which is also used in the neighborhood crime reports. So if we go into that application, you're going to see that crime data has also been populated there, and you can start using the application right away. And you can see that's updating as we kind of move along. And so the next step, you know, for if you're going to deploy this for neighborhood crime reports, would be to load your data for the public safety districts. And once you do that, you have 2 applications that have been completely deployed for your local government. And I think we've got a few questions coming up, Heather. If we want to take those now, Walt and I can tackle those.
Let's see. There was one that came through Q&A panel. What kind of source data is generally used in the U.S. cities as an input for this app? And I think that's when you were discussing the public crime map and the neighborhood crime reports.
Yeah, I think you know, Walt, I think it's the uniform crime reporting is kind of the UCR is the abbreviation, and that's generally like a bit more of a summary of how they talk about crimes. And then the NIMBRIS, the National incident-based reporting system is another standard that's a little more, the crimes are more at an incident level, so they're a little more detailed in terms of what those things are. And so both of those attributes could be used within this application. I think that's just a choice that the local government would make themselves or the law enforcement agency.
Yep. NIBRS is a more common, I should say newer, recent type of way of reporting. And for those of you that may or not be knowledgeable about that, is that typically law enforcement agencies like to report out, I think it's annually, but maybe in some cases monthly, to the FBI on their crime information, that's what's happening in their jurisdictions. And so those are the two formats that FBI likes to use, and when the agencies do report to them. So that's it. The other question, part of the question might be in terms of the file format. And again, this data could be something, as Lindsay mentioned, coming out of a records management system, which is quite typical. And that often is in the format of a CSV file. There are other ways that you can get data in, but that is one of the typical file formats. So in the United States, that's what we see a lot. Hopefully we've answered your question.
I believe so. If we get a follow-up,
Okay.
I'll
Right.
definitely ask that. Bill had just some kind of general concerns about using the application, because the old version of web app, or old version of, I'm guessing, operations dashboard went away, and he was just concerned about deploying this and then having a lot of his officers start to use it, and then being left without a working solution if we update the product. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yep, I can talk about that. Yep, and I'd seen that in many police departments. In fact, one of them that I've been working here in the Minnesota area, same thing happened. There's a couple things about that. I think that's a good point that he brings up. And changes in technology, how does that affect people, especially once they've gotten used to it? And Operations Dashboard has changed here recently, so that's a good example. But a couple things about that is, one, that first of all, you'd have to decide your agency. I think that's really big. Your agency has to decide whether they want to deploy it and when they want to, and so on, and how, because these are for public consumption, and so they would go on a law enforcement website. And I'll show you a couple examples of that in a minute. But so that's the first thing. Make sure that your agency, your chief, and the staff want to deploy them. That's the first thing. Second thing, and they need to. That's the big thing. Secondly is, how do you deploy it? And so what I always like to say when I was working with user sites doing implementation work is, I'd always like to stage it. So if I got a new version that I know that's coming out, or maybe it already has come out, such as the new version of Operations Dashboard, I would stage that in a pre-production environment and test that out for a period of time, maybe have some officers or some group that is assigned to that to give me feedback on it, and then we would make a collective decision about when we would turn that into production and then turn off the old version. So there's a couple of ways that you can do that if you decide that you in fact need to do that. But changing technology is something that we have to deal with, and it's a good question.
Okay. Nancy said, when you have to add a field in the field mapper, the field doesn't show up in the final data set. And then she said, I see the plus sign on the output fields. And she also mentioned that doesn't actual commit to the field, it's just the data set?
Yeah, just the data, that's right. So you're mapping one data from one field to another, so the data would come out. So if I have address in one field and I have another field that just says location or something like that, the data from the address field will go into the location, the target field, but we would not add a field. Now you could, if you wanted to, of course, you could simply add a field to it called addresses or something like that. That may not be a best example, but she's right.
Okay, that's all for now.
Okay, well, I am going to share my screen again and show you a couple more things. I kind of alluded to it. We have a little bit of time, so I wanted to give you some examples of some sites that are using it, so you kind of have a feel for what other organizations are doing. And hopefully you guys, Heather, you can see my screen, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to leave this up for a little bit, so if you wanted to take a screenshot of it or just go to their websites and take a look at what they're doing. But these are two organizations, both Toronto and Rochester, New York, police departments that have deployed many different applications, I should put in, and these are just two of them that they have done. So I'm going to pop out and go to those applications. The first one we're going to look at is Rochester Police Department and their open data portal, and here is the URL for that if you want to take a look at it. And as we scroll down here, we can see they have a number of different ones. They have data, but look at how they've organized it. They have overall crimes, they have the homicides, shootings, etc. with it. And underneath that, they have a couple of different maps, and the first one is the public crime map and the neighborhood history map, so it's very similar. They also have some download that you can download the data and so on. So they've done this on their open data site, which is actually really good. So we'll pop into their apps a little bit. So this one here is the public crime map from Rochester, and they have a little splash screen, which I would recommend that you have all your disclaimers on there from your organization, however you want to do that. I want to show you, some of you had some questions about ways that you can configure the web app builder. I believe David and there's some of the folks that asked about that, and you can see here there are different ways that you can do that. Some organizations, they like to have it on a 14-day period. Some just like to have it on a 28-day period, so it varies from jurisdiction. And then you can see how he's done the dates and so on. You can see here's the category, and as Lindsay mentioned, UCR, or Universal Crime Reporting System, and then the date range where he's put in here as well. So there's a number of different filters that he's put on here, and he's also put in the situation awareness widget so that you can select on a given location and set that as your location, and it'll fill in the crimes in that location, however you have it organized. So he's used a different widget in the public crime map. So that's some ways that you can look at it and get some ideas. And also he has an address search here. And I should mention there's a couple ways. Some people use an address locator. You can use their own geocoder, or maybe they're looking by a section or a beat if you just want to type in your section. Like earlier, I was doing it by neighborhood. So that's one example of their public crime map. Rochester also has a nice neighborhood crime history, and I have to say is that we got a lot of inspiration from Rochester when we were defining the functionality for the neighborhood crime history map last fall. And you can see they have an about widget in here. It gives you a little bit of information to the public about how they can go and use the application. Of course, they have a legend and base map switcher as well. And again, they have the situation awareness so they can search by an area, turn off layers, and print. So some basic functionality they have in here, but you can get a good history. I would just show you real quickly how when you select on one of these particular neighborhoods, and I go down here and set the location, that now sets this as my incident area, and I can look at all the crimes that have happened over a period of time. It takes a little while to populate, but you would be able to see locations of crime in that area over time. So that's just one way you can do that. And because it's a demo, it's not showing up like it would normally, but anyway, you can try that on your own. Okay, so I'm going to pop out of here while it's still grinding here and go over to Toronto. And so you can take a look and see what Toronto has done. Another good example. Again, they're trying to communicate with the public, try to keep them informed, but yet manage how that information is being presented out to the public. And so you can scroll down here. They give you what's new. You can see some statistics on crimes. You can download the data. They make it real easy for you to get the data, but the key here is they are the ones that are managing that data for the public, and it could be, members of the media and so on. They also have the couple of crime maps in here, and you can see we have a crime map at a year end or a year to date, and they also have a neighborhood crime map. I want to just scroll down so you can see how they've done it. Looks really good. It's nice and clean. Major crime indicators. So they tell you here, this is an important thing that you hear from a lot of communities. What are the indicators? What's telling us what's happening in our community? And of course, you can have individuals where they break them out as well. They have some data analytics, which I think is important also. They can kind of give you graphs over time, and then there, of course, their maps. So let's take a look at their apps for Toronto, and here is their crime map. And this one happens to be the year to date, which shows you the current ones. And again, they have a nice informative splash screen, so they have all disclaimers on here that you have to look at. And then they've done it a little bit differently. I wanted to show you this. They also have this information summary widget over here so that you can see, break it down by the type of crime, and look at how they have, in Toronto, they have a little bit different coding format, so MCI. And again, they're telling you when it happened and where it happened and the type of crime. But you can select on the type of crime, and then they also have the clustering. And I also wanted to show you how they can do the queries. Over here, they give you a drop-down list, so you can select out the type of crime that you want to look at, and then the division, and then potentially a time frame. So that's a good way to filter out the crimes after you've selected out what you're looking for. You could also do it the other way around, I guess. So that's a simple year-to-date type crime map. So if you need that, here's an example for you to use. Again, these are all using the Web App Builder, different configurations of Web App Builder with similar widgets. This one is their neighborhood crime map. And again, it allows you to, it comes up with a layer list. If you want to, you can select that out. It's got a nice information thing. It tells you a little bit about what you're looking at and how you can use it. And then you can turn the layers on and off if you want to, but you can come in and select your address. But I wanted to point out this over here. They're using another widget to be able to select out information that you might be interested in. So they're selecting out the neighborhood. So just a little bit different, and you can see how they've got their neighborhoods listed in alphabetical order. Makes it easy to find, and I think they have a number associated with them as well. But it allows you to search real quickly, find the neighborhood you're interested in. So just a couple of different examples of maps and apps that you can see that other jurisdictions are using to get you some inspiration or some insight. So that is what I wanted to show you there. I'm going to pop back into my PowerPoint because I wanted to show you where you can get some resources for the apps that we are showing you today. Again, these are pre-configured, so you can deploy them as Lindsay showed you with the sample data, and you can choose the sample data or not. And then you can just have the schema if you want to use that schema and put your data into it, or you can use your own schema and then modify the widgets as you need to meet your fields as you want to. So here's where you can go to find that. The basic thing you want to remember here is to go to solutions.arcgis.com. And under the local government, you will find a whole list of different communities or industries, and you'll see the law enforcement is one of those that Lindsay was showing you earlier. In the last 10 minutes or so, I wanted to do a couple things. I wanted to show you what is just got released as of today, talk a little bit about some of these new applications and what's coming for law enforcement. This set of applications here is for all of local government, but just FYI, so you might be interested in them. There's a new set or new collection of right-of-way permit solutions, quite comprehensive, that are updated. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation about we maintain and keep these things up to date for you, so you have to spend your time doing that. So if you want to, you can go out and grab the latest ones and try them out on your own before you deploy them to the rest of your organization. There's some site selector and residential comp finder solutions that are also using the Web App Builder configuration, which are very helpful. For those of you that work in that type of organization, and development organization. There's approximately 20 new versions of the operations dashboard, which gets to the question that was asked earlier. Previously, those were using the older version of Ops Dashboard. We've updated those for you, so if you're interested and you want to use those, you can go out and deploy the new Ops Dashboards for the same applications. So for example, one of them I was talking about earlier, two of them actually, was the Tactical Operations Dashboard that's been updated and cleaned up using this new capability. And we also have some for the opioid response dashboard and so on. Again, there's about 20 of them that went out, I think, of this morning. One that Heather's been working on is the new fire service maps. And it's actually a combination of the old fire station wall map and fire runbook. Those were two ArcMap-based applications that have been replaced with a new configuration of ArcGIS Pro. And a couple of highlights on that is it put those two applications together because we feel, after getting some feedback over the years from fire personnel, is the same personnel that create the station wall map and the runbook do them both. And just a background on them, a station wall map is typically generated in a station. It's usually on the station wall to the left of the engines or the apparatus in each station, so that drivers can look at that wall map often and get familiar with their area where they have to respond to, or where they're coming from, where they're going. So it's one that's used in wall map. And the problem with that is if you have changes in your jurisdiction, like new neighborhoods or something like that, you need to update that wall map, and you may need to do that in multiple fire stations, which can take time. So this application allows you to update those wall maps and print them out on a plotter so they can be hung periodically, like every 6 months or once a year or something like that. The second one is the fire runbook. And fire runbooks are useful for putting as a hard copy of where you're going in each apparatus or on the desk in each fire station. And it's used by fire response personnel to be able to look at where each address on each page. Often I've been in fire stations where when the tone goes off in the fire station, up on the board you'll see the page number for the fire runbook for that local jurisdiction. It'll say something like M53, and so they immediately flip to that page and say, okay, now I'm looking for an address on this page. So it's a backup mechanism, fire runbooks, and what this application does is it automates the process for keeping those runbooks up to date. Again, as you get changes in your community with new neighborhoods and streets and so on, you may need to update just a couple of pages or maybe several of them, and it allows you to do that in a more automated way. And the new ArcGIS Pro application has a series of tasks that walk you through the process of updating either your wall map or your runbook. So I think you'll find that to be very helpful. We have some new value analysis dashboards. It's a new dashboard configuration that you can use. And as he said, there's about 14 new solutions that are available in the new solutions deployment tool. I shouldn't say new, but the solutions deployment tool that Lindsay showed you earlier. So quite a few things were updated and went out today. As far as what's coming for the next release, crime analysis tools, we have been working with the Esri UK team. They have an extension that some of you may know, that have been around a long time may know about. It's an extension to ArcMap, and they have come to us about a year or so ago and asked us if we could replace that extension with a new configuration in ArcGIS Pro. And so we are working actively on that project right now. It's going to be an add-in to ArcGIS Pro, as you can see on the screenshot here, that gets added to your ribbon. And it has a series of tools in there that help certified crime analysts be able to analyze data. And there's quite a variety of different types of analysis that they need to do. In this one here, we're looking at incident paths. So we're looking at where somebody's coming from and where they're going to for a particular type of incident. So there's quite a variety of things that the crime analyst tools do. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's over 20 of those tools that will be part of the new tool set in ArcGIS Pro. So that's we're targeting for June. And we are in our third beta test with domestic users here in the United States, and we've completed some with some international users already. The next one on the list here is the public safety incident maps. This is replacing the existing public safety incident maps that we have out there. Again, it's an ArcMap application that's going to be updated with ArcGIS Pro. It will have tasks in it that will allow you to step through it. And that's helpful when you don't do it all the time and you don't remember how you did it 6 months ago. You can come in and just click on the task and it'll walk you through the process so you don't have to remember how you did it. But just an update on that one. Again, it has a couple of scripts that Ryan has updated with the new API for Python, which allows us to incorporate that into not only the crime analyst tools, but to some new pro configurations. And you can automate that in Windows Task Scheduler so that it reads your data coming out of your records management system and publishes it to ArcGIS Online or on-premise, and then you can consume that information, those daily or weekly updates, however often you want to do them, inside of a web-based app, however you would like to do that, or in a pro configuration like I have here. And then the last one on the list is the special events operations. We have slated for later this year to start a new set of applications to support public safety, so not just law enforcement, fire, and emergency management, for special events. So when they need to plan out a special event or create what's called an incident action plan for a big event in their community, a set of apps that will help support that process. So that's in the backlog, and that's what we're going to be working on later this year. So that's an update on what's coming down the road. I'm going to see if there's any last questions before we close off here and try to answer what we can.
Sure. Actually, so far there's only one. So Jay had a question about the examples that you provided. He wanted to know, and I'm not sure if you know, did they configure the solution as out of the box, or did they do some custom programming?
Well, they are using out of the box, just Web App Builder. To my knowledge, they did not do any custom code in there. I haven't, again, like you said, Heather, since I didn't do the work for them, I don't know for sure, but it looks like just Arc Web App Builder. So, you can configure it however you want to. But you could also add custom code into them if you wanted to, but again, that's a much bigger task. But they are not using the solutions that we just showed you. They just didn't deploy them. They were built before we created the solutions.
Okay. Sounds good. And I think his name is Ian. He said good job, and he said thanks for highlighting the Toronto police, and
Oh, good.
because he
Very
works
good.
for Esri Canada.
Oh,
And
good. Very good.
Lindsay and I
Well,
are in the Ottawa office, so we're fellow Canadians as
yeah,
well. So
it's a great example, and they've done some great work there.
yeah.
And we thank you as well. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate everybody that was joining in, and I guess we can answer further questions on the meetup page.
Yeah, sounds good. So, yeah, like Walt said, we look forward in hearing from you at our next meetup. That will be Thursday, May 10th, where we'll be providing an overview of crash and traffic planning maps and apps. And until then, have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.